Dave Robichaux is a Depression-era person, as I am. He was born in the Depression, as I was. And we belong to what I think is a generation that will be the last to understand what is called traditional America. We're a transitional group. And so the world in which we were raised is fastly disappearing. The country in which we live today is dramatically different from the one in which I was raised. And so Dave Robichaux is looking at Louisiana as a microcosm of a much larger entity, the United States, and the post-9/11 world in which we live. And he sees things taking place that bring him a great sense of angst. In effect, he has trepidation about the levels of corruption in government. And in this case, he becomes involved with the gambling industry there in Louisiana, in this group of really terrible human beings. It's the only way to describe them. You know, the Spanish have this wonderful expression, sin Dios, sin vergüenza, without God or shame. So we meet these guys who represent the legalized gambling industry in not just simply the state, but it's a national group, of course. And the mafia used to provide these services for us when it was illegal. Now the government helps the same guys provide it to us in a legal fashion. It also deals with the lobbying scandal that began in Louisiana, the evangelical figure we meet here who's wired into the White House. That story has its origins right in Louisiana. I write about Louisiana in what appears to be a regional way. That's the setting for the story, but it's meant to reflect a larger story or larger themes. I have great trepidation about the survival of our republic. It's the first time in my life I felt that maybe we crossed the Rubicon and we won't get back over it again. I was, as I said, born in the first administration of FDR. I remember the years of privation to a degree, as a child, and the war years, and then the McCarthy era and the violence of the Civil Rights era, and the misadventures in the 1960s in Indochina. But I never thought that we were at risk as a people or as a nation. I don't have that confidence today. And of course the book also deals with the coming of Katrina, which will certainly remain in Louisiana's history as the most cataclysmic event the state ever experienced. I was 2/3 finished with the book when Katrina hit New Orleans. And then, of course, Rita hit Cameron Parish, south of Lake Charles, only 3 weeks later. And it was almost as severe a storm as Katrina was. The damage it caused was largely to the rural parishes. But the consequence of those two hurricanes is just enormous. So there was no way the book could not deal with it. There's nothing that can be written about Louisiana today that doesn't include the effects of those storms. In writing a series, you have to encapsulate events that have gone before, and you have to recreate for your reader, your first-time reader, the frame of reference of your first-person narrator. And you have to do these things without seeming to echo or to be repetitive and are redundant. And so it is a balancing act. The first 3 books were written as a trilogy: The Neon Rain, Heaven's Prisoners, and Black Cherry Blues. And that was my attempt. This sounds vain, but my attempt at Paradise Lost and Regained. It's about the descent into the abyss of Dave Robichaux. That Dave struggles with his alcoholism in those 3 books, you see. The books since then have dealt with some of the same themes, but I think in a more expansive way. But each book, at least in my attempt in writing it, has been intended as a separate entity. Each of them deals with a different problem, although ultimately they're all about the misuse of power. The person who told me early on that this would be a successful literary series was my friend Charles Willeford from Miami. You know, he wrote Miami Blues. And he was a crime novelist. He and I were good friends for 20 years. And he's passed away now. But I sent the first 2 chapters to Charles, and he made a couple of suggestions about them. But he told me at the time he thought Dave Robichaux would be one of the most successful characters in crime fiction. He's an Elizabethan figure, ultimately. He has all the characteristics of the Renaissance tragic hero. He has a blue-collar background, but he possesses the classic and noble virtues of charity and courage and honor, and he tries to give voice to those who have none. His undoing, of course, is his greatest vice, and it's hubris, which is the tragic flaw of all the great protagonists, Hamlet or Othello, and the old man and the old man and the sea, the people who go out too far.